The Supergrass who nailed the Rettendon murderers considered telling the police he lied to escape the constant fear of being tracked down. Darren Nicholls, who is now living at a secret address under a new identity, went national with his story on Thursday night in a graphic BBC documentary. The former electrician told the viewers he had considered suicide to escape being traced and punished for grassing on his mates. He said, "I thought if I told the police I was lying, would they, killers Michael Steele and Jack Worms, like me again?" Nicholls, speaking in hiding on Friday, explained, "Mickey Steele was like a father to me, and I found it very difficult to betray him, but I had to tell the truth." He added, "When I agreed to take part in the documentary, I thought it was going to be about the witness protection programme, and I wanted to show people they aren't set up in luxury with millions. It's more like a handshake and directions to the dole office. If they had told me the programme was going to brand me a liar, I obviously wouldn't have got involved. I would have to be some sort of complete genius to make that story up. I know some East End gangs have claimed they did the killings, but that's because it gives them kudos. It would also boost their images to kill me." He claimed he was particularly fearful of the Worms family, but John Worms, who believes his brother Jack is innocent, said, "We are feeling extremely hopeful after seeing the programme. We finally managed to get our views across." Nicholls, he told his story over again, but we were there with our points too at last. And it was during primetime viewing. The members of the jury have now seen the real Nicholls. In court, he came across as a little boy who claimed he'd been forced into being the getaway driver. On television, the actors portrayed the real man, a cocky liar. They also heard how Nicholls had to convince his own wife he was telling the truth. "We intend to carry our campaigning until we finally get my brother out of there. The programme has really helped us with that fight. Our legal team is working hard with us, and now we have national newspapers on our side." The Inside Story documentary also showed the heartache suffered by Pam Worms, Jack's mum. She was shown breaking down after her son was on the phone in tears from prison. The programme very nearly didn't make it onto the screen. It was originally due to be aired back in February, but following a lengthy legal battle, Nicholls got it banned because he feared it would identify him. It was finally shown after the programme makers agreed to use actors to play the Supergrass and his wife. Nicholls is still waiting for the last details of his new identity to fall into place so we can finally find work. He has been hiding or in custody since May 1996, when he decided to put his life on the line and give evidence for the Crown. He told an Old Bailey jury he was the unwitting getaway driver for Michael Steele and Jack Worms back in December 95. The bodies of Pat Tate, Craig Rolfe and Tony Tucker were found inside a Range Rover the following morning down a snowy track in Rettendon. Nicholls claims the motive was that Tate had double-crossed Steele over a cannabis importation. Steele and Worms denied the claims but were convicted and sentenced to 3 life sentences, and they've always maintained their innocence. During the trial of Mick Steele and Jack Worms, it came to light that Darren, the Supergrass, had his wife's driving prosecution dropped after bribing a corrupt police officer. The jury were told that the police informer, Nicholls, offered a £100 bung to the Essex detective, and days later, the charges against his wife were dismissed. Nicholls, who also openly dealt drugs with the officer, offering him large quantities of amphetamines. Edward Rees, defending Peter Corey from Clacton, who faced a charge of conspiring with Worms and Steele to smuggle cannabis, said to Nicholls, "You were going to bung him £100. Nicholls replied, "This was mentioned." Mr. Rees said, "And what happened?" Nicholls replied, "I was told that the police were going to prosecute." The court heard that Nicholls would frequently discuss drug deals with the Essex detective, who was arrested on the same day the police informer was pulled in by officers investigating the triple killings. They were told drugs seized by officers, which were kept at the station where the corrupt officer was based, had gone missing. Nicholls said he had turned to the corrupt police officer and become his informant with the aim of getting Steele and Worms arrested and jailed. Also, during the trial of Mick Steele and Jack Worms, it came to light that the Supergrass would indeed sit in his cell majority of the day, playing cards and chatting about his favourite hobbies with the murder squad detectives involved in the investigation. The Old Bailey jury heard the police informer also had the use of a Nintendo computer games console and a fridge packed with ice-cold drinks as he sat in his prison cell waiting to give statements. Defending barrister David Lederman, QC, representing the 36-year-old Jack Worms, who was jointly charged with the triple killings, claimed officers investigating the murders had forged a unique friendship with Darren Nicholls, and he was accused one officer of telling lie upon lie as he was cross-examined on the witness stand. Mr. Lederman, QC, asked Essex Detective Constable Christopher Winstone, "Was part of your welfare trips to Mr. Nicholls to play cribbage with him?" DC Winstone replied, "No, it wasn't me. It was Detective Sergeant Kaling who played with him." Mr. Lederman said, "And you discussed with him about classic cars?" "Certainly a relationship must have been forming." DC Winstone replied, "Yes, sir." Mr. Lederman, "And Nicholls ended up recognising you as a friend?" DC Winstone replied, "No." The jury were then shown photographs of Nicholls' cell, complete with a Nintendo game system and a fridge full of drinks. Mr. Lederman said, "When he was not being visited by you, he clearly had some methods of keeping himself amused." DC Winstone replied, "Yes, sir." The court heard how Winstone and his colleague, Detective Constable Michael Brown, had struck up a unique rapport with Nicholls following hours of welfare visits. Mr. Lederman, during cross-examination of DC Brown, claimed the version of events surrounding Retterdon that Nicholls had first told officers was completely different to the one that was said in court. And it was alleged Nicholls had first told DC Brown that tape recordings of the Supergrass telling police about the murders would not be handed in to the defence counsel. Mr. Lederman said, "Why did you say this when it was completely wrong?" DC Brown replied, "In hindsight, if I'd have been asked that question now, I would have not have told him that. I would have told him that the tapes would be handed to the defence counsel." Mr. Lederman said, "Mr. Brown, may I suggest to you that you are lying and lying as you go along?" DC Brown replied, "I am certainly not lying to you, sir." Earlier, the court had heard Nicholls had first told the police he believed he was taking Jack Worms to a drugs meet in an airfield, and that the plane was to kill the pilot of the waiting aircraft, steal the merchandise, and then blow up the plane. When in the witness box, Michael Steele was asked about his relationship with Darren Nicholls. He revealed, "I found there were two sides to him, a very silly side and a very educated side. He's what I would call a habitual, always turning up on my doorstep. It was during one of these visits to Steele's home in St Mary's Road, Great Bentley, Essex, from which Steele ran his business, that Nicholls allegedly made his astounding confession." Steele told a spellbound Old Bailey jury it was after Nicholls had visited Basildon Hospital in November 1994, where Tate was being treated for a gunshot wound to his arm. He said, "Nicholls told me I could do that. I could shoot someone. I have often spoken to myself about it." When you got to know Nicholls, he was quite schizophrenic. When he said this, he was standing with his hands in his pockets and his head bowed. He looked like a child that had been scolded. Steele said that Nicholls was very upset by his visit to the hospital, as Tate and his friends had ridiculed him. Steele also told the jury that Nicholls was a drug importer who had brought cannabis into the country via car ferries using drivers known as suicide jockeys. Mr. Parkins then asked Steele about his relationship with victim Pat Tate, who dealt drugs in jail and often took up to 8 ecstasy tablets a day himself. Steele said, "When I first knew him, He had a magnetic personality, and while 70% of people liked him, 30% loved him, but he gradually changed into a junkie. Now, back in 2006, there was a report in The Sun that Darren Nicholls had blown his own cover whilst boozing. It went on to say that Darren had to be moved into a safe house by the cops after boasting in a pub about his parts in the murder case that became a hit film. Furious cops discovered his bragging after he was arrested for allegedly battering a love rival outside of a pub. Days later, the 41-year-old's car tyres were slashed. A police source said, "Nicholls is acting like he's got a death wish. There are many who would love to get their hands on him. 11 years may have passed, but they still want him dead for what he did." Darren is believed to have received a new identity and a home at a cost at $100,000. A spokesman from the unnamed police force that arrested him said, "One male dragged another into the car park of a pub and punched him several times. Nicholls is on bail for the alleged assault."